Good evening. Welcome to a special event hosted by the Black Economic Alliance Foundation discussing the recently announced Center for Black Entrepreneurship that will launch this fall at Spelman and Morehouse Colleges in Atlanta. I'm Tony Coles. I'm co-chair of the Black Economic Alliance. And before we begin our program, I'd like to provide brief context for this exciting new initiative. For the entire history of America, Black entrepreneurs have faced significant barriers to starting and growing businesses. As we approach the 100th anniversary of the race massacre at Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that unfortunate event that destroyed what was now known as Black Wall Street, we often think about these challenges in terms of structural racism. The events of the past year, however, have provided a new backdrop for efforts to address the challenges to achieving racial equity and economic mobility, particularly for Black businesses and business owners. Some people have learned for the first time just some of the many ways that systemic racism and structural inequities have hindered Black entrepreneurs from starting and scaling businesses successfully. For example, prior to the COVID pandemic, it was estimated that just one of every $100 of venture investment went to Black entrepreneurs. After the conversation about racial reckoning, which riveted the nation last year and is still reverberating, that number has increased, but only modestly so, at roughly 3 of every $100 in 2020. And this with a sharp and precise focus on addressing some of the racial and economic equity issues we've identified. The Black Economic Alliance convened leaders in academia and business to form the Center for Black Entrepreneurship, or CBE, out of a recognition that we need to create a new Black economic infrastructure to help close the racial wealth gap. In this case, the CBE is creating a first of its kind ecosystem of information, exposure, support, mentorship, education, and opportunity at one of our country's most heralded centers for Black excellence, the Atlanta University Center, including Spelman College and Morehouse College, which have been 2 of the top 3 performing historically Black colleges for more than 100 years. This exciting and innovative initiative has been anchored by a $10 million gift from the Bank of America as part of its $1 billion social justice investment, and has provided great momentum for additional signature gifts, which are in process. In addition to the direct work of the center, we're also launching the Black Entrepreneurs Innovation Fund to invest in the most promising and exciting business ideas that emerge from the center. Stay tuned for an upcoming announcement about the launch and anchoring of this fund with a major gift from a lead sponsor. Tonight, you'll hear from successful Black entrepreneurs, investors, and academic leaders about the proven keys to success for new businesses, especially Black businesses. And importantly, you'll hear more about the multiplier effect that this ecosystem will have on the ability to generate and pass on generational wealth for Black families and communities. With that introduction, it's my pleasure to hand the program over to our moderators for this evening, my fellow BEA board member, Tia Brakely, who recently assumed a new role as Chief Strategic Development Officer and Chief Governance Officer at Blue Meridian Partners, and my fellow co-chair and brother, Charles Phillips, Managing Partner and co-founder of Recognize, a technology investment firm with over $1 billion in assets, and the former CEO and chairman of the global software company Infor. Tia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tony. And welcome to everyone who's here this evening. We're extremely excited to be able to have this conversation about the Center for Black Entrepreneurship. I know there is a substantial amount of excitement around the center, and it's a really good opportunity, I think, to meet the moment. We all know that entrepreneurship is an important source for wealth in the Black community. And it's our pleasure to have with us this evening, Rich Dennis as our panelists, Morgan Devon, Dr. Schmidt Campbell from Spelman College, and Dr. David Thomas from Morehouse. Charles, would you like to make a quick statement before we dive into questions?
Well, I just first of all wanted to thank both presidents of Morehouse and Spelman, because when this idea first came up, and I'm talking to some venture capitalists, and I shot them both the email, within minutes they both said, we're in, and let's talk about this. And so this wouldn't have happened without their leadership and eager response and interest in entrepreneurship. So thank you two to get started. So Tia, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. So I will actually start our first question for Dr. Schmidt-Campbell at Spelman. So Dr. Schmidt-Campbell, you and I have been working alongside a number of other members of the BEA for quite some time. Maybe you could talk to us about the culture of entrepreneurship that's evolved at Spelman and Morehouse and the entire AUC over time, and what you're really trying to catalyze with the Center for Black Entrepreneurship.
Sure, Tia. You know, in many ways, entrepreneurship is kind of baked into the DNA of most HBCUs, because in the early years of our existence, in the early 20th century, really that was the only option, having our own businesses, our own medical professions, law professions, our bakery shops, our insurance companies, our hospitals, our schools. But over the years, what we've seen at the AUC in general, and in particular at Spelman College, is a huge surge in the interest on the part of our students in wanting to understand, what does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? What are the steps that I have to go through in order to get my idea patented, or my tech startup going, or a product I've developed, manufactured, and delivered to an audience? What kind of capital do I need to develop that? How do I market that? All of these processes are the subject of intense curiosity on the part of our students. And we began to notice that right away, our students were beginning to organize clubs and organizations. We have something called Spellpreneurs, for example. We have an innovation lab, which is almost always packed with students who are working on some kind of prototype. So it's really very exciting to see this interest, and then to have the opportunity of the Center for Black Entrepreneurship and our partnership with the BEA to really formalize that interest in a very deliberate and intentional way.
So David, one of the questions we get often is, why did you pick, Spellhouse in Atlanta? Why not some other university in the country? And so maybe you can talk about the history of not only Morehouse, but why Atlanta is the best place to get started here.
Great. Well, thank you, Charles. I think one of the things that we see happening here in Atlanta, and there's actually been several articles just over the last week talking about individuals, companies choosing to come to Atlanta because it is a hub of entrepreneurship and across a number of different industries that range from technology to entertainment. And you probably have, well, we know that we have more Black businesses starting and embedding themselves in Atlanta than any other city in the country right now. So we have surpassed a number of the other former hubs for Black business. And it's a very dynamic ecosystem for business. And in that hub are a number of Morehouse and Spelman graduates who've started some of the businesses that actually anchor the Black entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Atlanta. So, and the other, quite frankly, is if we really want to see inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship, we have to go to places where Black talent is not an exception, but an expectation. And right here in Atlanta, you have the largest consortium of historically Black colleges and universities in the country. with proven records for creating talented individuals who've gone on to create businesses and be part of driving the entrepreneurial ecosystem here.
Thank you. So Rich, you and I have been working together for a number of months now on the Center for Black Entrepreneurship. You and your experience with Shea Moisture, Sundial, Essence Ventures, and now New Voices Fund obviously bring a wealth of information and experience around entrepreneurship. Talk to us a little bit about the multiplier effect when a business started and run by entrepreneurs succeeds. I mean, part of what you've done actually through your funds is helped to create other successful Black entrepreneurs. So you know exactly how to get this done. So talk to me a little bit about the multiplier effect when a business starts and is run by a Black entrepreneur and how that impacts the community.
Yeah, it's amazing how time flies, right? How we started working on this and how it's come together, and it seems now like it was just like that, but we all know how much it took, right? It's kind of the same thing with entrepreneurship. Is like you toil and you toil and you toil, and then you realize, right? And then when you start to realize, it's a matter of having the tools and the resources to scale. And so, that multiplier effect is what transforms communities, what has transformed other communities, and what will transform our community. In what New Voices has done and in our fund, we see that multiplier effect now over the past 2 years as really transformational in our communities. And I'll give you some quick stats here on how that works, right? So, the median US salary for African Americans is $41,300. Median for Hispanics is $51,450, and for Caucasians it's $70,642. Specifically in the companies that are in the New Voices Fund, those 13 companies, the median is $92,978. Right? These are people of color hiring people of color, investing in people of color. They have almost $30 million of payroll, of which 78% of that is going directly into people of color families. So what you end up with is high-paying jobs concentrated in Black communities, which then allow Black families to live different lives, have different opportunities, provide different educational opportunities for their children, invest in other businesses, and invest in other places. So that multiplier effect can become extremely, extremely valuable beyond what the wealth that you create in the business and that you create for the entrepreneur that is founded and running the business. And so that's why, the CBE is going to be so critical, because we have to provide those foundational opportunities, not just on the educational side, but also on the resource side and on the investment side, so that we can fuel this type of development and growth in our communities.
Yeah, Tia, can I just hop in here?
Hop in, for sure, hop in.
Because I just want to underscore what Rich was saying. Before I was a president, I spent many years as a business professor. And one thing that is very clear is that Black-owned businesses disproportionately hire Black people. So where we create Black entrepreneurs, we are also having a broader effect. And, Rich gave data about his stable of companies, but what he's described is a broad and research verified phenomena that if we invest in Black entrepreneurship, we are investing in wealth creation broadly in the Black community. And that's one of the reasons why I made this a priority for Morehouse. And the last thing I'll say about it is, if you go to Dr. King, who was a Morehouse graduate, his last speeches, they were all about economic equality. And
Right.
that's the last mile of finishing the work that, you know, we've been engaged in at Morehouse and Spelman for the last 100 years plus.
Let's go to Morgan, founder of Blavity. Good to see you on here. Thank you for lowering the average age on this call by a lot.
Be here.
Hey, Charles, you didn't thank me, man.
Well, yeah, I skipped over you, man. So Morgan, one of your mini projects is AfroTech, which I've in past lives been a sponsor of. So I know how important that is, and it seems like it took off out of nowhere. Been a very successful conference. So first, can you describe what it is? But more importantly, have you seen entrepreneurship from Black people move into the tech community at the pace that you would have expected? And then what's happened? You know, is it actually happening? If not, if it's not happening, why is it not happening?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. And AfroTech is a movement. It's a conference, it's a community. It's a website that now is almost exceeding blavity.com. And part of that is because of the energy and the momentum around ownership really is the key word that I would say for the millennial and now Gen Z audience, and thinking about how we all can be owners in the tools that we use, in the products that we're buying. You know, I have this kind of motto myself where I'm like, I'm going to wear my friends' lipsticks that they own. You know, I'm going to shop at the stores that put my friends on their shelves. And I think that AfroTech, which started 4 years ago, I started AfroTech because as a Black person in technology at the time, I was working as a product manager at a big tech company. Prior to starting Blavity, I would go an entire day on campus of 3,000 people, 4,000 people, and not see any Black person. And I'm not just saying like Black woman or, you know, Black person between the ages of 34, any Black person. And this, you know, so that was why I started AfroTech, was because we needed to come together. We're there, we just weren't necessarily as visible as we could have been. And we needed to come together to share our collective knowledge and also to accelerate the horizontal switching within companies so that we can have more ownership and more power and more seats at the table. To my surprise, though, what started to happen was that everyone started to become intoxicated by the culture of the tech CEO. And so AfroTech really spun out into how do we facilitate that acceleration for more Black founders to raise venture funding, to get their first check at AfroTech, and then to be more successful. I think it's something around only 4% of Black entrepreneurs make it out of the startup phase. So how does AfroTech as a community provide that social capital and the information so that more people can be more successful? So that's where our focus has shifted to in the last couple of years.
It's great.
You know, and if I may, if I'm going to follow David's lead here and just jump in. So if I may say, you know, what Morgan started at AfroTech is really something that is adding a tremendous amount of value to Black entrepreneurs in the tech space. Because what she did was she gave them a home. She gave them a place that they could come to, they could congregate with each other, they could learn from each other, they could share experiences. And what's also been valuable about that is that one of the excuses that we've had for why there aren't more Blacks in tech and why there weren't investments in tech is because people say, oh, we can't find them. We don't know where they are. Well, Morgan puts them in front of them, right? And we've been a big beneficiary of that. I think we've gotten probably 4 or 5 companies that we've invested in from AfroTech, right? And so, you know, that's the other piece that I think CBE is really going to help in leveling this field, because CBE will be able to do it at scale, right? And that is one of the things that we're always sort of missing when we do these things, is you start them and you build them, but then we've got to scale them. And so that's another part of where I think CBE becomes the linchpin to changing the wealth trajectory in our community.
Morgan, what I really love about AfroTech is this notion of ownership. And this sense of proprietorship over the technology is really important to incubate in our young people very early. So at Spelman, about 5 years ago, we created an innovation lab, which is really a maker space. And we had all kinds of technology in it and technology platforms. And our students could just come in with their projects and work on things. They could fail, they could do it again, they could work things out, they could create. And it has just really created this fertile environment where they can really be masters of the technology. And, you know, they're big fans also, I will say, of AfroTech as well. But what we will be able to do in the Center for Black Entrepreneurship is to create an entire environment of that kind of experimental, inventive, I can be master of this technology space for our students.
Mary, you already answered the question I was about to ask you about why Spelman and Morehouse, because you know studies continue to show that the three key things that Black entrepreneurs need is education, capital, and support, right? And I think what we're seeing right now is there's a real rush of capital. A lot of people want to write checks, and we like checks. But I think, you know, what excites me the most about the Center for Black Entrepreneurship is this move into education and scale. So maybe talk a little bit about the education component of the Center for Black Entrepreneurship.
Sure. Again, about 4 or 5 years ago, because there was this percolating interest, we saw all these student organizations pop up. The school helped our students form something called Spellpreneurs. And really what Spellpreneurs was for 1 year, we had almost what I would call a mini curriculum crammed into that 1 year. And they were seminars in which we covered different topics over the course of the year. And we ended the year with a pitch competition. And you know, students could compete and pitch their projects, and we'd have a modest prize. And really from that has grown the curriculum that David and I now are shaping. We're actually in the process of really filling that curriculum out over the course of 4 years. So that is a very deliberate path where you go from understanding some basic foundational principles. You understand what it is to actually be in the field and work on some projects. And then you get a chance to set up your own project or business or tech startup as your capstone. So we kind of started at this miniature level and then are now just expanding and intend over time to replicate this in other HBCUs. So this will become a network of educational outlets where we can really, to use Rich's terms, amplify the impact of what we're doing.
Yeah, and see if I could add one other dimension to those three things that you laid out that I've seen over my time of watching individuals and in particular Black, my Black students who've gone out of different institutions thinking about starting businesses. There's also an element to it that is about imagination. And creating an ecosystem like we're trying to create, even beyond Morehouse and Spelman, is really about creating a place that inspires the imagination of these young people that they can go build businesses. As Mary described, creating those spaces where they all come together in their innovation labs, or at Morehouse, our Morehouse Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center that's been in existence. and systematically providing them exposure to people like Morgan and like Rich inspires their imagination. And I think we can't underestimate how important that is as we educate young people and young Black people about what the possibilities are for them, that they can actually imagine it. And then educate them about the specific ways in which being Black does matter. I think, Rich and Charles and Morgan can probably speak to the ways in which being Black can create some friction, if you will. Doesn't make things impossible, but it can create some friction as you're trying to build a business and get people to invest in it. And how do you manage that, right? And that it is, you can manage it, and that's about imagination. And I think that's also what we're creating.
I also think, David, what I find also that's been extraordinary about this experience of building the Center for Black Entrepreneurship is the fact that people like Tony and Charles and Morgan and Rich and Tia are available to our institutions in a way that builds on their expertise, because the imagination is absolutely critical. I couldn't agree more, but so is the expertise. And having gone through those experiences and having figured it out and come up with solutions. So having the BEA as advisors has been extraordinary.
Yeah. And the term that, I came to learn as we were building this with the BEA, that I had never considered before, was this idea of the ecosystem,
right,
and the concentric circles,
right,
that you were instrumental, Mary, in helping us to understand as a way to diagram what we were doing.
I think I actually got that from Charles, but thank you. I'll take the credit.
Actually, I'll take the credit. I got it from Tony. Let me ask both of you, because one of the things people ask is, what exactly does the Center for Black Entrepreneurship do today? And so, for instance, there's different models. I teach in the one at Stanford, and there the professors invest in the companies. The students sometimes, leave, stop being students, I guess, and quit, go start companies. That's one extreme. They're extremely, let's start a company and you can get engaged in any way you want to, versus get a 4-year degree, or do you expect most people to start a company or just participate? What is the faculty doing? What's the curriculum look like? Just give people some nuts and bolts.
Well, I think I'll start, and David, you can fill in anything that I miss. But I think that for us as Spelman, we recognize this is a liberal arts education, and these 4 years are part of an opportunity for our students to get a broad education that's going to give them a context and a perspective on the world. And so within that context, they also have the opportunity to develop these very specific skills around entrepreneurship. So to start off, they will be taking courses, but at the same time, they will have spaces like David's Dream Center, like our Innovation Lab, where they can try out ideas, where they can experiment. They will have internships as they go from one year to the next that will enable them to work with entrepreneurs, either locally or in their own hometowns. They will have, as part of their assignments, projects to do. And our goal, just as is the case with Stanford or Babson or Brown or any of the ongoing entrepreneurship programs, is to bring in faculty members who have been practicing entrepreneurs themselves, who have started business, who have successful tech startups. I mean, everybody who's on this call will be called on to become a faculty member. But yes, it'll be a combination of very formal courses, field work, projects, competitions, capstone projects. So it'll be a learn by doing as well as a learn the principles.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to what Mary has provided is, you know, my vision is not that we will be overrun with students majoring in entrepreneurship, but that we'll have an entrepreneurship minor that if you are a student, you know, many of our students are interested in arts related areas because we are a liberal arts college and right, but understanding how they can take that and create a business around that set of ideas. So they're majoring in literature or some, you know, non-business area subject, but getting the tools and experiences that spark their imagination about their ability to be entrepreneurs, to control their intellectual and artistic capital, and turn it into vehicles for wealth creation. Again, you know, back to Mary's point, exposing our students, you know, to people who've done that will be, in my view, critical. And then to the other point about being able to export what we create here at Morehouse and Spelman, we're already looking at how we leverage technology to do that and create ways to bring the experiences we create for our students to other individuals in places that may not have the access that we have.
That's a really interesting and critical piece. I want to also take it now from the education piece to kind of thinking about the maturation and where we're hoping that these entrepreneurs will go. I'll direct this question to Rich. Now that you've been on kind of both sides of the negotiating table, both as an entrepreneur, but now as an investor, deciding which businesses and founders to invest in, tell us about what you've learned about what particular factors keep Black entrepreneurs from securing venture capital and how the CBE can help to counteract that phenomenon.
Yeah, I think the number one factor that keeps them is access, right? It's just knowing who to go to, knowing who's interested in the things that they're interested in, knowing who understands where their perspective on how they're approaching things and why they're approaching things. I think that's probably the number one thing, and that can all be summed up by the biases that exist in the VC community against Black entrepreneurs, right? And so part of what I think we have an opportunity to do here, and in the different partnerships that we have, is to help those in the VC community understand their biases and help them address those and change those. It'll also be prudent, and what I'm looking forward to probably most in continuing to work on this, is to help our cohorts understand what those biases look like and how to counteract them before they ever face them, and before they ever have to be sort of subjugated to them and be surprised by them. Because a lot of times what we see is young Black entrepreneurs have an incredible idea, start to execute that idea, start to track their metrics, take those metrics and stand them up against, like any other entrepreneur would do, stand them up against the data that they see in the marketplace, how other people are performing, and then to constantly have the goalposts moved, because while this data set and this level of performance was good and great for somebody that comes from a different background, from a white entrepreneur, is not the same measure for the Black entrepreneur. And then the answer is, we love what you're doing, but can you go do this, this, and that? Which just goes back to what everybody on this call, what our parents taught us, right? It's like, you have to be twice as good or 3 times as good as the rest of the marketplace in order to just participate. That's not even to compete, that's just to get in, right? So I think one of the key factors here is going to be us teaching our cohorts on what those biases look like, how to counteract them before you go to it, and to level set their expectations before they go into those environments. Part of that is going to be coming out of the CBE, not just with the knowledge, but also the opportunity to have access to capital that understands who you are and why you are, that gives you the opportunity to be successful when you get to those stages, right? So I think that's sort of the first thing. The second thing I sort of started off with, which was making sure that the venture capital world understands where they are biased, how they are biased, and how we work with them to change their systems and their structures and their processes, right? And this also holds true for our partners in the banking world, right? Where not every entrepreneur needs equity investment. Some of them just need some credit, right? And some basic sort of fundamental sort of debt. And so helping on both fronts there, I think would be critical. And then I think really the next piece of that is helping our entrepreneurs understand sort of what I sort of call the 3 stages of wealth creation, because what we're actually after here is them creating sustainable wealth that gets transferred into our communities and helps to develop our communities, right? And in my mind, and this is David and Mary, I'm auditioning for one of those professorships now, right? To me, there are 3 stages, right? The first stage is actually creating the wealth, right? And that's the stage within which you're building the business, you're creating the product, you're driving the business, you're getting distribution, you're creating the business, you're creating the value in the business. That's sort of where we tend to get stuck a lot, right? The next phase of it is actually unlocking the wealth. What is that? What does it look like to unlock that wealth so that you can do some of the things that the folks on this call are able to do, right? You unlock the wealth, you're then able to take that wealth. Like I built Sundial and sold it, unlocked that wealth, and was able to use the wealth that I unlocked to invest back in Black entrepreneurs. So in the New Voices Fund, we've created over 32 Black millionaires in 2 years. That's what happens when you unlock the wealth. You can invest back in, right? And then the third part of it is how you transform and transfer that wealth so that it becomes sustainable to a broader community, not just you and not just your family and not just your. So I think CBE has the opportunity and ability to have a set of captivated audiences, one being the cohorts, the other being the partners that we have, and I'm sure there'll be others. But to be able to help them understand these various stages and what they look like and the things that we do along the way to ensure that they happen, I think for me is, and that's been the spirit that we've all put this together around. For me, that's when we're really rocking and rolling, when we're really having the impact that we're setting out to have.
Rich, you mentioned kind of the lack of access to capital and where the VCs need to open their minds a little bit more to Black entrepreneurs. So that's sort of how this got started when we were talking to VCs, and they said, well, we're just not around Black. We don't see those entrepreneurs. We don't have the pipeline. Right. And we said, well, you do this for a living. You build businesses all the time. It's who you're around. It's proximity. So you create your pipeline. That's what you do. And so moving them down and having them interact at the centers, hopefully we'll do that. But I'm wondering, do we have the same issue around industries? So if you look at the types of businesses we typically have been starting, it's been a lot in the consumer space, a lot of retail. There are lots of other industries in pharmaceuticals, chemicals, but maybe we weren't around that. Do you think the CBE, maybe Mary and David, you jump in here, can we expand the number of industries that we start companies in that can lead to bigger companies and have more opportunities across more industries? Morgan's doing that in technology, but what about all the other industries?
Yeah, Morgan jump in too on tech.
Oh, sorry. That's when David was making the observation that, because we're both liberal arts colleges, and that we will draw students from a multitude of disciplines. They'll come from English literature, but they'll also come from biology and biochemistry, and they'll come from computer science. And so they'll come with their subject areas and the industries attached to those subject areas. And even as, even as we're providing, because we do this for both colleges, we provide ample opportunity for our students to have work experience in the form of internships to be able to understand what these various industries are. So we have people working in a laboratory at, say, Genentech, to understand what it is to develop a pharmaceutical. They begin to get an understanding of what's required for different businesses and for the development of different areas. So I think this notion that we're drawing from this broad spectrum of liberal arts disciplines is absolutely fundamental to our capacity to broaden the various entrepreneurial fields for our students.
Yeah, I would add to that, and one reason why at Morehouse, what I'm focused on is building a minor, not necessarily a major, in entrepreneurship, so that students from different fields can get exposure to the tools of it and be exposed to what I call the imagination. Is most people who become entrepreneurs actually don't make the jump to entrepreneurship until they're in their 30s. They leave college and they go work for a company that's already established. But if they have the tools and the imagination, then I think we increase their belief that they can go do that, regardless of the fields. And that's where I think, we're going to be advantaged, because we're creating an ecosystem of people who are in lots of different fields, right? Tony Coles, bio life sciences, the financial industry, information technology, the kind of business that Rich is building, so that our students, when they leave, they may be going to work for Universal Music Group or a biotech company or pharmaceutical, but they just sort of have that built in the same way that for 153 years, we taught them, no matter where you are, you should be about leadership and service.
Right.
And they figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
One of the
I'm sorry, go ahead, Morgan, go ahead.
Yes, and then one of the things that we see at AfroTech is the risk management. We call it the golden handcuffs, right? You've worked your whole life, you've gotten your master's degree, you got your PhD in a life sciences area, or in any sort of kind of professional industry, and you're making a lot of money if you're already in tech. You're already making $1 million a year, and you already have stock, and it's vesting in some of these companies. Those are oftentimes also the most qualified people to take the risk into entrepreneurship. And that leap, I think, is where CBE could have a greater impact as well, because if we can make it easier for them and less risky, where they know they have a network of peers, they have the access to top VCs who aren't going to make them run around and talk to associates when they're 40 years old and they're directors or SVPs at these incredible companies. That is where I think in 12 to 18 months, we could see a huge increase, because I think everyone, people want and aspire to that level of freedom and control and impact of entrepreneurship, but are you willing to take the risk when you've already kind of made it?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And as you were speaking, Morgan, you remind, and I'm, a bit older than you, but you reminded me of what people would say when I was young and people were talking about the risk. And I could hear my mother saying to me, "You're going to do what? You got a good job and you're making good money."
That's right. And you worked hard to get there.
Yeah. But Charles, I mean, I think, and that's, again, this conversation just continues to reiterate the value that CBE is bringing and will bring, right? And part of that value is, I think, to your point, is the diversification of industries. because I tell people all the time, and when I say this, this will ring a bell to all of you, just because you know, those of you on here know sort of how I think about things. But you know, Black people are the greatest entrepreneurs on earth. If you've had to endure what we've had to endure for almost 5 centuries, right, and still be here, right, and have to figure out how to fix the plumbing in your house, right, figure out how to fix the heat, how to get your car started without having the parts, without having the funds to go buy, without having the ability to buy a new car, right, because of the way that you've been excluded from the income creation opportunities, right? The red line, you buy a home and then it gets redlined. What you do there. So we've been entrepreneurs in all of these different industries all this time. You know, what our mothers do to keep us healthy when they can't afford to buy the medication that's prescribed, or when they can't even go to the doctor, right? And so it's in us, right? What we are now doing is providing a structure through which we can develop that from within us, right? You know, one of the things that all of us on this call fought with and for when the first PPP funds came out was, you know, many of us are sole proprietorships, right? Those sole proprietors are, you know, air conditioner repairmen, they're plumbers, they are, you know, they're mechanics, like you name it. So now having an infrastructure through which we can develop them, where they know they can go get the resources, with the unbiased resources, and where they can go get the support, because the CBE is not just going to be about what happens on the Morehouse campus, or on the Spelman campus, or as it grows and rolls into other environments, and also it's also going to be all those other industries out there that we're now holding accountable, right? So in the pharmaceutical industry, what are we going to do to hold them accountable, help us develop these entrepreneurs, to help them bring them to life? How we help them support these entrepreneurs that want to follow a Tony Coles, right? So I think that the CBE also now plays a critical role in how we diversify not the entrepreneurship in us, but how we monetize our entrepreneurial abilities to change our community. So I think we're going to see an explosion across all these industries that we haven't typically been recognizing, but that we're actually functioning and doing today.
Right, Rich, I think that's an incredibly important statement. And when you consider why do we have it at Spelman and Morehouse? Why are we choosing these HBCUs? I mean, it's the same is true for us. We've been functioning as high-level, top leading liberal arts colleges with a fraction of the resources of our peers. I mean, I'm talking about a fraction of the resources. So that sense of inventiveness is there. It's part of our DNA. And what we're doing, I think here, it is the habit of mind on campuses like Spelman and Morehouse to look at our students and look for their assets. And it's exactly those assets that you just cataloged that we're bringing to the fore in our students to say, you know, you actually have experience with this. This is part of the way you have to live in order to succeed and to thrive.
Yeah, and you just have to show us how to monetize it, right? Like we've been shown how to monetize it in entertainment. We've been shown how to monetize it in sports. We've been shown to monetize it in these other fields. Now we get to show them how to monetize it, not just across industries, but also, quite frankly, globally.
Yes.
Right. Because these are now opportunities that with technology and with resources, you can reach places that you've never been able to reach before. And you know, I'm a big proponent of, you know, we've got to connect Black people globally, because that's where we have the biggest market opportunities, right? That's where we can drive the greatest scale. So if we start to do that here, which is what we plan to do, I think we should mark this day down, because when you start to look at how the economic conditions of Black people change globally, it's going to start with these types of actions and activities.
Yeah,
So Rich, I have to give you a shout out. I got a text while you were talking from someone who said, that man is very wise. Happened to be my mom texting about you. Listening, I didn't even know she was on. I was like, you're supposed to be texting about me. But she reminded me, her mother used to say, take what you got and make what you want. She said, Black people manage money better than anybody in the world because we had to.
Yeah.
So she's agreeing with you.
That's the truth.
yeah, and
Wow, I'm sending her a bouquet of flowers as soon as we get off, Charles.
and connected to your wisdom that you were just laying down. When I talk to my students, I talk to them about the fact that, you know, Black people have proven to be the most innovative people on the planet because we've had to do so much with so little. And when they ask me, you know, what do I mean when I talk about entrepreneurship? I describe to them that it's about thinking beyond being a small business and how do you go to scale? Building businesses to scale so you can unlock wealth, as you describe, to do the things that you really want to do for the world.
Yeah.
And I think there's a way in which we've taken our innovativeness, we've brought it, so, you know, we've created some small businesses, but the small business mentality is different than the entrepreneurial mentality.
Yeah.
Which I think is about taking ideas to scale.
So I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball because we've had so much conversation about the ecosystem, and I'm sure that people listening in will have this one question, which is clearly the intent of the CBE is beyond Spelman and Morehouse. So maybe if each of you can just talk a quick minute, we've got a few minutes left, about the ecosystem we're looking to create, how the CBE can impact someone who, you know, may have graduated from Spelman or Morehouse, to your point, Dr. Thomas, years ago, and is now looking to make that leap. Talk about the way that the existence of the CBE will kind of expand the ecosystem.
So, you know, I'll launch into it. A few things. One of the, one aspect of the CBE that we've already actually raised some funds to support is that all the curriculum that we develop, we will also be able to make available online.
Right.
So if you are that person who has graduated from college 20 years ago, you're thinking about, you know, building a business, we're going to have a curriculum that you can plug into on accessing capital, on how does bias influence the ability to do that. I think that, you know, that's where we will be unique, and as well as building a curriculum in a way that we hope will be transported to other historically Black colleges and made available, both in terms of the curriculum being made available that can be taught by other faculty, other places, but also our own courses being available online in either a format where you can get a certificate or a format where you can plug and play. You know, I need to know about access to capital. What is a business plan? And cases about the experience of Black entrepreneurs. Back to the idea of imagination. I know, you know, I taught at business schools my entire career before I got to Morehouse, and I was dean of one. And I don't think I ever saw more than 2 cases about a Black person who built a business. And that creates imagination.
That's powerful. I mean, I think that summary alone is really important. I always say systems change requires 2 things, innovation and scale, and the online component. Clearly, you've spoken to the ability to dream. The online component really is that scale.
Yeah, and the last thing I would mention connected to that is, you know, the BEA is taking the leadership in also developing a fund.
Right.
And that creates the opportunity for access to capital that can oftentimes be the launch pad, because everybody loves a winner. So if somebody can get funding, you know, and then create proof of concept, that, you know, increases the likelihood that they'll get other funding. So I think that's the other part of our ecosystem.
Yeah. And I think if I'm to sort of, you know, jump onto this bandwagon, and this word that we've all been using so much around this is ecosystem, right? So I think what we're creating here is an ecosystem that has never been intentionally created before, that has never been thoughtfully executed, right? And that has never been held accountable to outcomes. And we're creating all of that here. I think, though, the biggest value that all of this is going to bring is confidence. That, I think, is going to be the game changer that the CVE, the BEA, the Morehouse Spelman, all of what's happening here, because we're now going to have young people growing up and having a place to take their ideas and go develop them, and the confidence to know that they will get a fair shot at developing them. Their parents will point them here because their parents will know that they will come here and not have to be subjected to the biases that they were subjected to, the fears that they were subjected to, the reasons that they had to take those golden handcuffs on, and that you talked about so eloquently, Morgan. The confidence that's going to be developed here is going to be what's going to be the game changer.
So it's about time for us to wrap up. Let me thank everyone for joining. This has been a great discussion. I was hoping, Tony, if you could describe the fund, because we didn't have time to get to that a little bit more, about the Evergreen Fund and the status of that, and BEA's role in it would be great as you do the close.
Sure. Well, look, I cannot tell you how impressive it was for me to watch and to listen to each one of you talk about a dream realized. You know, the mission of the Black Economic Alliance is work, wages, and wealth, and creating an economic opportunity agenda for Black Americans. And we are unabashed and unashamed about specifying that this is about creating access to great jobs, great salaries, and using both of those as a pathway to wealth creation. And what better concept than the Center for Black Entrepreneurship, which I think, as Rich eloquently said, Black businesses lead to Black jobs, lead to Black salaries, leads to Black wealth. And what better partner could we have than Doctors Campbell and Doctors Campbell and Thomas, the amazing and the inspiring leaders who are with us this evening, my friends, and people who have a real vision for how not only education, but lives can be changed in this country. In addition to the great work that they're doing with the curriculum, with the online programming, with the preparation of research projects and extracurricular activities, we will be raising an Evergreen Fund, the Black Entrepreneurs Innovation Fund, that will provide funding for the best ideas for those who are the graduates and the certificate holders of the online and the on-campus programming from the Center for Black Entrepreneurship. It will be a $50 million fund, which will get these projects started. And our goal is to make investments in not just the students, but in their lives and their ideas that will transform other lives in turn. So stay tuned for a very important announcement. We have just finalized a verbal agreement for an anchor gift for the Evergreen Fund, the Black Entrepreneurs Innovation Fund. So stand by and stay tuned for an important announcement there. But let me add my thanks to that of Charles. Charles and Tia, wonderful, wonderful job facilitating. The amazing Mary and David. I always love what you guys have to say, and I learn something every time I listen. Morgan, I'm blown away at how brilliant and inspiring you are. And to my brother, Rich, you set no finer example of what Black excellence is, which I think, as David said, is not an exception, but an expectation. So thank you guys for joining us for a wonderful conversation. We look forward to your continued support of the Black Economic Alliance, and we are truly happy to be in the house with some of the best minds in this country on this topic this evening. Good night, and enjoy the rest of your week.